let's talk about that immigration police state. And before I get into that tough story, and I don't want to tease you too much, like with an appetizer or anything like that, but I do want to show you an image that really does say a lot. So let me just open it up to you here, everybody. Check this out. Nicholas Kristoff writes, take a moment to look at the inhumanity captured in this extraordinary photo running on the front page of tonight's Minneapolis Star-Tribune. It shows federal immigration agents immobilizing a protester on the ground and spraying chemical irritant directly into his face. Look at that. Just amazing. They've already got him pinned. They have 3 people. His arms are behind his back. You can see it. He's flat, face down on the ground, and they're doing that. Now, let me get into that story about the Tufts student. All right. Let me give you this. Then we're going to go to J.D. Vance and the lies of J.D. Vance. But as you know, the student, Ms. Ozturk, we said that it seemed like the only reason ICE went after her was because she put one op-ed into the Tufts newspaper. And Tufts, if you're not familiar with Boston, Tufts is in Cambridge, which is on the north side of the Charles River, just north of MIT and just north of Harvard, actually. It goes, MIT is right next to the river. You go up Massachusetts Avenue a little bit, you get to Harvard. You go a little further up Massachusetts Avenue and you get to Tufts. And like I said, I used to work in the area of Tufts. I used to get off at the Porter Square T station all the time. And she was right there. And somebody shot that video from the apartment, and you saw her approached by mostly, except for one person, masked people. I think there were 7 people, and there was only one who was not masked. And they just took her off the streets. She's a grad student at Tufts. And we speculated, it was probably because she was speaking for peace for the Palestinians. And guess what? That's exactly what it was. We also got this internal document about why ICE went after the Tufts student last year. It was because she wrote an op-ed in favor of peace for Palestine. Now, a lot of people have been posting this. I went with Adam Steinbach's one. I actually posted a couple, but he's got the actual documents here. So this will hop us over there, and you'll see it. Here is the newly unsealed State Department memo confirming, finally, that the detention of Tufts student Rayumsa Ozturk was based on an op-ed. No anti-Semitic activity, no support of terrorism. An op-ed in a student newspaper. Amazing. So again, this goes right back to, and we bring it right back to that debate about the Sedition Act and John Adams. And as I mentioned, the Alien and Sedition Acts, 1798. You could criticize the vice president, but you couldn't criticize John Adams. And of course, John Adams, with the Alien Act, said that people could be deported if he thought they were too close to France. Well, as I mentioned in my book, Live Free or Die, Thomas Jefferson in 1798 and James Madison the same week said it was a state issue for immigration, very clearly. And that continued until 1875. And as I mentioned, when Jefferson became president, all the people who had been apprehended on the Alien Act were freed, and they were paid restitution because they understood that there was no constitutional authority to do it. So let me show you what they've done to this poor woman. Here we go. Sensitive but unclassified. Law enforcement sensitive. March 21st, 2025. Recommendation that you approve the revocation of F-1 visa effective immediately for her of the Immigration and Naturalization Act. And of course, that you authorize the transmission of the attached notification of the Department of Homeland Security noting the immediate revocation of Ozturk's visa. Yep. It provides that an alien is deportable if their non-immigrant visa has been revoked under INA Section 221, subsection I. Ozturk was issued an F-1 visa on December 14, 2020, valid until December 9, 2025. And as they say, while Ozturk has been involved with actions protesting Tufts' relationship with Israel, DHS has not, however, provided any evidence showing that Ozturk has enraged any anti-Semitic activity or engaged in any anti-Semitic activity or made any public statements indicating support for a terrorist organization. Well, of course, this is from the attorneys that they sent to the attorneys where they admitted, no, she wasn't engaged in anti-Semitic activity, which is why she's free now. They had to admit it. As you can see here, Peter Bonilla writes, the files on Ozturk indicate further that the government relied solely on the inferences made from an op-ed she wrote for the student newspaper to carry out the revocation of her visa, her arrest, and her detention. After reviewing the information from DHS, the State Department acknowledged in an action memo now fully available through the unsealed documents that the Department of Homeland Security provided no evidence of Ozturk engaging in anti-Semitic activity or making any statements indicating support for a terrorist group. And of course, if they're going to say that Hamas is a terrorist group, then that means Benjamin Netanyahu has been supportive of a terrorist group. Now, on the ground, let's go through some of the big things that are happening. Let's talk about the big event that many people are discussing, J.D. Vance's visit to Minnesota. We'll talk about some of the very admirable protests going on in Minnesota. And we'll also talk about how J.D. Vance made claims that ICE is not targeting people based on skin color. So I've got actual video from the White House website, and I'm going to refer to some of this video here. As I mentioned, I reviewed the video. It's a half hour long. And as I mentioned, J.D. Vance's appearance in Minnesota was what many pro-freedom scholars and advocates expected it to be, a gaslighting session to promote the so-called hard work of the invading ICE goons and to blame the victims of the ICE agents for their own suffering and the Fed's attack on their natural rights. Not even 2 minutes into the White House feed, Vance began his hollow harangue. Here is the start of his many assumptive statements that presume to imply that A, ICE has a constitutional justification to exist, B, ICE or any federal agents have a constitutionally sanctioned justification to be in any state, C, the locals are the instigators and initiators of the violence. Now, we're going to go to that video in a minute, but I want to show you a couple things that other people have brought up first to put them before me on this video. Here's one from Mika. Vance, ICE is not targeting people based on skin color. Well, as we know, they literally argued that they could do in a court in California. We spoke about this months ago, and here it is. And that's what the Kavanaugh standard is on now, that they don't need to get a judge's warrant. They can just base it on their own assumption, which includes race, skin color, language, accent. In a 6-3 vote in the case known as Vasquez Perdomo versus Nome, the Supreme Court granted an emergency request, this is last year when we reported on it out of California, from the Trump administration and temporarily halted an LA judge's order that barred roving patrols from snatching people off California streets and questioning them based on how they look. Literally, the Trump administration made the argument, and now Vance is saying this is not a group that's going around and looking for people who violated the law based on skin color. No, that's precisely what they argued, JD. You know it if you are on top of this, Mr. Lawyer. And of course, this is what he tried to tell people. It's stunning. How can they lie like this?
Now, to the accusation of racial profiling, look, it's something that we take very seriously. We will take accusations of racial profiling back to Washington. We'll certainly look into them as they come up. But this is not a group that's going around and looking for people who violated the law based on skin color.
It's a stunning thing. Literally, this is like the flip side of people who look at the Constitution, can see that there's no mention of anything in particular that they're trying to get the government to do, and then claim that the Constitution allows it. It's the flip side of that. It's the yin to the yang. It's now J.D. Vance is saying, well, we're not really doing that, even though it's already on record in the wording of the opinion from the Supreme Court that they argued that. Geez, what do they think? We're stupid? Holy moly, right? Unbelievable. Just incredible. It's just, oh man. So let's get into this. Here we go. This is J.D. Vance as he tried to gaslight Supremo, okay?
So number one, One of the things I learned is that the guys behind me are doing an incredible job. And frankly, a lot of the media is lying about the job that they do every single day. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't occasionally stories out there, there aren't occasionally videos out there that suggest that these guys, or at least some of the people who work for them, are not doing everything right. But very often, if you look at the context of what's going on, you understand that these people are under an incredible amount of duress.
Now, let me just pause it there, because first, I want to make sure that I get something out there. The predicate, the baseline predicate for what he's saying with these guys in their uniforms that you paid for, is that they are following orders properly. Now, as anybody who's watched any or read anything about the Nuremberg trials knows, that's not an excuse. All that is superficiality, gloss over the question that is at the heart of it, which is, are the orders proper morally, ethically, or if you want to look at their constitution, constitutionally? That's how many of these people get away with it. I'm a law enforcement officer. So any law, if it says that, you can whip an Hispanic person, is that okay? That you can throw Japanese people into internment camps? You're just following the law? Is that it? What if, A, the Constitution doesn't allow for them to pass those kind of laws? Then you're on a faulty premise, and that's where he starts, with a faulty premise. Unless people get radical and get like a radish to the root, the radii to the root, they're starting off on faulty premises, which is exactly where he wants people to start. He doesn't want to address the fact that they're not supposed to be in the state. Here we go.
An incredible amount of chaos, and because of a few very far left agitators, a lot of these guys are unable to do their jobs without being harassed, without being doxxed, and sometimes without being assaulted. That's totally unacceptable.
Did you get that? So again, it's the standard. They're unable to do their job, but he's not telling you what their job actually is. What is the source of any so-called authority for their job? Is there something in the Constitution that lets you do this? No. The only process, which is either declaration of war or letters of marque and reprisal, or a request from the state, has been completely overlooked. And the immigration policing is not something you're supposed to be doing, as Jefferson and Madison said in 1798. Somebody might want to hand him the Texas Constitution and say, hey, how is it that the United States government allowed a state to come into the Union in 1869 when it had its own Bureau of Immigration in there? They wouldn't have accepted that, would they, JD? Did you ever study that in law school, JD? Did you? I bet you did. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe it's just been completely opaque to you and you haven't been able to see any of this stuff. Maybe all this history is something you're trying to avoid intentionally. I don't know, but it's there. So all these people lined up behind him are based on a faulty premise. And of course, it's very important to mention, now he's gaslighting, because he's saying, you see, these guys are under a lot of stress. The attackers, the kidnappers. See what he's saying, right? Your face hurt my fist.
One of the things that I want to send a message to is, yes, come out and protest me, protest our immigration policy, but do it peacefully. If you assault a law enforcement officer, the Trump administration and the Department of Justice is going to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law.
So anybody who sees those internal documents knows that, of course, they give instructions to their guys on how to put the people who are peacefully protesting into positions where they won't be able to escape. They'll get boxed in. And then, of course, they'll claim you're not moving fast enough. They'll come up with any argument they want, and they're not supposed to be on the streets. They're not supposed to be there.
And I wanted to show some support for these guys who, frankly, are operating in a very, very tough environment. I heard a lot of stories today about that I think drives home just how chaotic the environment on the ground here has already gotten. For example.
So let's pause it right there. And he's going to give us one of these very important examples. But let me ask you, if you had a bunch of people who claimed authority over you, and then they said, we've got these rules, we won't go past those rules, and then they went even further and started walking up and down your street, you'd be 100% justified to defend yourself. You're not on the offense. They're on the offense. I mean, how much clearer does it have to be?
Did you know that within the last, I think, week or so, maybe even more recently than that, you had a couple of ICE officers who were off duty, who had been doxxed online, who were sitting and having a meal at a restaurant in Minneapolis when a bunch of agitators showed up, locked the door, made them feel like they were in danger for their lives. And then, of course, it was federal law enforcement officers who had to come up, lower the temperature on the situation, and actually get those two off-duty officers to a point of safety.
This man seems genetically incapable of understanding that that is precisely what ICE agents are doing to people eating in restaurants, shopping at Target, picking up their kids at school, trying to get to work, or even working in the restaurants that might have been serving those guys. In fact, he didn't mention that ICE goons went to a restaurant, ate at the restaurant, heard some accents, and came back, arrested the people who were working at the restaurant, and the restaurant is closed now. And when we talk about doxing, can anybody ask Mr. Vance on an ethical level, how is it possible that I can be forced to pay for my own protection, and then when I want to know whom you're hiring, that's bad? That's called doxing. Don't forget what Noam tried to say on CBS when Ms. Brennan said, well, you know, we've got the case of this man who, the ICE agent who shot Ms. Good. Oh, don't mention his name. That's doxing. She's like, it's public record. What are you talking? No, don't keep mentioning his name. Just insanity. It's totally nuts. Now, I've got another section here. And as I mentioned, I want to stress these points, everybody. Again, first, he intimates that ICE has a constitutional justification to exist somehow, that they're following the law. They're trying to, enforce the law, which, of course, is just the overlook the faulty predicate of, the Nazis, the same sort of mentality. ICE, and he also is saying that ICE or any federal agents he presumed to imply that they had a constitutionally sanctioned justification to be in any state, which is totally ridiculous. Then he seemed to imply that the locals are the instigators, as you saw, and then that local cops are not helping round up people, and that's the problem. If the local cops would just help ICE round people up, then that would be much better. That would be awesome. We'll go more.
Now imagine, if you would, your life and your perspective on law enforcement if you can't even go to a restaurant without some agitators locking the door and making you feel like your life is in danger.
Again, literally, these guys just shot a woman on the street. It's amazing. It's incredible that he's got no self-awareness about what he's doing.
That is the environment that has been created, I think, by a lot of very, frankly, far-left people, but also by some of the state and local law enforcement officials who could do a much better job in cooperating and working. And by the way, I'm not talking about the cops, who these guys told me on the ground, the cops are very sympathetic to what they're dealing with. I'm talking about the state and local elected law enforcement officials who could do a lot better job in making their lives a little bit easier. And in the process, they would make the lives of all Minneapolis residents easier. And that's what we want. We want to be able to enforce the immigration laws on the one hand, while on the other hand, we want to make sure that people in Minneapolis are able to go about their day. And I want to say just one last point on this. So I heard from a business leader today who told me a very tough story. And I think so much of what's gone wrong in Minneapolis is people not trying to understand the perspective of somebody else. Try to understand what somebody else is experiencing, whether they're a law enforcement officer or anybody in the community here in Minneapolis. So they told me a story about this manufacturing facility where an illegal immigrant was being arrested. And as these employees are going into the manufacturing facility, all of a sudden, an illegal immigrant shows up. They don't know it's an illegal immigrant. And then a bunch of ICE officers descend. Now, these people just want to go to work. They want to go to work safely. And now all of a sudden, there's a major law enforcement operation happening right outside their place of business. Now, from what
you see what I'm saying? He's just completely oblivious. It was safe. It was fine. Everything was fine. The guy was going to work. He wasn't robbing or stealing from anybody. He was going to work. And please, let's not have somebody else come in and say, well, he was stealing some American job. Well, then you better start banning those teenagers. Better start blocking people from buying anything from outside your town. Don't have people come into your state from out of state to work. It was fine. And then the ICE agents descended on the dude who was trying to go to work. Well, yeah, these guys are working there. They didn't know they were working with an evil foreign guy. So when our good guys in the capes came to kidnap the guy, well, things got a little crazy. Wow. Unbelievable. And again, when asked about ICE kidnapping a father and abducting the child, Vance simply assumes that the baseline norm is that it's okay for a group of armed thugs paid via coercion of taxation to kidnap a man. So, of course, in his view, the ICE goons were somehow protecting the child who was left fatherless.
We'll take some questions. Thank you, guys.
Vice President Vance, a local school district here is alleging ICE agents detained a 5-year-old after preschool on Tuesday. We've also seen multiple American citizens detained by ICE or harassed by ICE in the last 6 weeks. Are you proud of how your administration is conducting this immigration crackdown here in Minnesota?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that we're standing behind law enforcement, and I'm proud of the fact that we're enforcing the country's laws. But, you asked a question about this 5-year-old kid. I actually saw this terrible story while I was coming to Minneapolis. We just left Toledo, Ohio this morning for an economic messaging event. And I see this story, and I'm a father of a 5-year-old, actually, a 5-year-old little boy. And I think to myself, oh my God, this is terrible. How did we arrest a 5-year-old? Well, I do a little bit more follow-up research. And what I find is that the 5-year-old was not arrested, that his dad was an illegal alien. And then when they went to arrest his illegal alien father, the father ran. So the story is that ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to let a 5-year-old child freeze to death? Are they not?
It's amazing. It's incredible. Yeah. So, when we kidnapped the kid's dad, the kid was left there. The dad didn't want to get kidnapped. He tried to escape. The kid's left there. So what are we supposed to do? Hey, I got an idea, JD. How about not engage in aggression? And that includes the aggression of making me pay for it. How about that? There you go, huh? Oh, and by the way, don't forget that JD Vance has been a massive hypocrite about so-called immunity for the ICE goons. This will round it off. JD Vance, on January 8th, you have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy's protected by absolute immunity. Today, I didn't say that officers who engaged in wrongdoing would enjoy immunity. That's absurd.
The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. No, I didn't say, and I don't think any other official within the Trump administration said that officers who engaged in wrongdoing would enjoy immunity. That's absurd. The precedent here.
And the amazing thing is, some MAGA cult people are so willing to blind themselves that they won't even think about the first cut. Now, ICE already is causing problems in Maine. Ed Krasenstein has this one. It's absolutely crazy up in Maine. Cumberland County, Maine Sheriff Kevin Joyce just blasted ICE for detaining one of his corrections recruits, saying that, quote, "We are being told one story, which is totally different than what is occurring." Here we go.
We've all seen the 3-minute video. And I've heard some people say, oh, it's hard to watch. What was hard is that there were 5 to 7 ICE agents there. In my world, my colleagues, we've arrested some dangerous people on the back roads of Cumberland County with 3 or less deputies. Yet this was a show of force, a show of whatever they were trying to do with 7 people. What's even more disturbing is the comment made by the witness that videotaped this encounter, who said that in the 3 minutes they got out, they pulled a guy from the car, handcuffed him, put him in the car. They all took off, leaving his car with the windows down, the lights on, unsecure, and unoccupied. They left it right on the side of the street. Folks, that's Bush League policing. Again, in my world, you wait for a wrecker. You wait for somebody to come pick it up that the individual wants. Or you get permission to drive the vehicle into a public parking spot and you lock it up and you give the person their car keys. You don't leave their personal belongings unsecure along the streets of the city of Portland.
Now, I just want to pause it there because he makes valid points as far as the day-to-day simple things. But hypothetically, let's say they were doing everything perfectly the way that he would have his guys do it. It's still completely anti-constitutional and on a deeper level, immoral, as is any political entity that forces anyone to pay even for his salary. The force is the problem, and the rest of it stems from that. Now, over in Rumble, we got some great comments from people. Freegan is in the house. Vance, can you comment on ICE shooting the eyeball out of that other little boy? Yeah, that one where the kid got pulled up, or maybe it's a totally different one. You get the ICE guy yanked him up and then dragged him across as his eye is bleeding. There might have been another one. And then Freegan also says, I tried to talk sense into the MAGA-tards at Hagman Report. They're a cult. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's something else, you know. It's interesting. I'm still thinking when I look over in the chat, I'm still thinking about, trying to engage in a fruitful dialogue and present information to people who cast aspersions, which someone did inside our chat before he left, at you all in the chats. And it's really kind of a sad thing because you can see how defensive the person is, because their argument is so weak and they're not presenting real information, rather than saying, hey, I'm curious, what do you have to present? And then refuting it or anything like that in a calm way, starting to get kind of inflammatory. And it's not super bad if you're over in the chat or anything. It's just a brief blip. But also the idea of, hey, I disagree with you. Okay, present your argument. No, I want you to debate this person. I still think that's just so funny. It's like, dude, no, you debate. That's the point. You bring up your points. I don't have a disagreement with that guy. I haven't talked with that guy. We have fruitful conversations. You're the one I'm talking to now. Yeah, well, he'll beat you up. No, I don't care. Dude, seriously, I'd rather listen to the damned, okay? You have no idea, dude. You have no idea. And by the way, if you really want to debate this and you want to get into it, we'll have a fruitful conversation. I hope I can convince you. That would be wonderful. Okay, that would be great. So hop on anytime. It would be great. We'll be friends. It'll be fine. All right. So now I also want to mention that not only should ICE not exist and not be in Minnesota, and the DHS claim that their attack on an innocent man in his home was somehow justified. Remember, they went after that Asian guy, took him away, and Crocs and his underwear in sub-freezing temperatures the other day. They said that they were going after someone who was a sex offender. Oh, yeah, they were going after a sex offender. What's wrong with you, Ms. Brennan? They were going after a sex offender. How dare you bring that up on CBS or anything like that? Well, guess what? As the Minnesota Department of Corrections Chief Paul Schnell tells Aaron Burnett, the sex offender DHS said they were searching for was already in custody. But J.D. Vance, well, if they would only do a better job, then, we wouldn't have to be here. There we go. Hold on. Sorry.
That they said when ICE agents went. There's another, we were talking about the 5-year-old, but another story that's gotten a lot of pickup, and that is on the left, the focus on the man in his Crocs. That they said when ICE agents went to his home that he had done nothing wrong and they shouldn't have been there. On the right, they're saying, well, that's because they were looking for 2 convicted sex offenders. who were living there illegally. And again, that Minnesota had refused to, even despite the conviction, to have leave the country. So that these are the two stories out there. They have one man, they say DHS says sexually assaulted a minor and is currently at large. So all of that sounds really terrible, but you looked into it, Commissioner, and this particular man, you say, is not at large?
Not at large. He is, in fact, in prison and subject to a detainer.
I know the volume is a little bit low on that. So that's Pete Schnell. Again, he's the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Corrections. No, he's not at large. He's in prison. Oh, good thing. Good thing, huh? Yeah. And finally, just a nice thing to see, although it's got the bad side of it because the cops are pulling these people away. I want to show you a number of people, over 100 priests arriving in Minneapolis arrested in Minneapolis for protesting ICE in Minnesota, where today it's minus 21 degrees outside the airport. So here's just a little footage of those courageous people doing their thing in the freezing cold. So far, over 2,000 deportations have gone through MSP per the organizers of the event. So there you go. The clergy gathered in prayerful solidarity to demand airlines, especially Delta and Signature Aviation, cease contracting deportation flights to DHS. So good for them. All right, there's so much more that I could get into about this, but I do want to mention the final thing about Mahmoud Khalil's situation. We talked about Kilmar Abrigo Garcia and what's going on with him. Well, I do want to mention again, the DOJ is saying they're making preparations to ship Mahmoud Khalil to Algeria. Now, we mentioned the Algeria thing a while ago. They were going to try to do it. They're getting closer to trying it. So if you go to the news notes, I just want to give you this. Since a panel of the Third Circuit Federal Court ruled, this is last week, that Mahmoud Khalil's kidnapping and deportation case should be heard in the fantasy-based immigration court, a court that is not constitutional and does not abide by the Bill of Rights for regular trials, evidentiary hearings, and juries, etc., Mahmoud Khalil, they say, can be caged again. And the feds want to send him to Algeria. And also, you'll see in here that Judge Napolitano has an excellent piece on the police state.